My classroom has been negative behaviour free for the last 19 years, and I'm going to tell you exactly how I did it and the neuroscience behind it. We use neuroscience to make behaviour easy and the brain science behind behaviour. Because when we understand the brain, behaviour becomes easier. I'm Danielle Douglas, the Behaviour Brain Consultant from Let's Talk Behaviour, and we are the UK's first behaviour and neuroscience school. We are proudly supporting over 80,000 educational influencers, children, teachers, and schools across 87 countries. Our award-winning tools, techniques, and frameworks underpin all of our models and our behaviour curriculum. So I didn't wake up one day and think, you know what, the world needs another behaviour specialist. This role was born out of pure desperation. In 2007, I walked into the classroom for the first time, and I was expecting these 30 children to do exactly what I wanted them to do, but they wanted to do exactly what they wanted to do, and I learned the hard way. In 2011, I had my first class with significant special educational needs within the mainstream classroom. At least 70% of the children in my classroom had special educational needs. And it wasn't until I had a tough Ofsted that I was sitting in my car thinking, I have a decision to make here. I either leave and quit teaching or I double down. In 2016, I started my first company, which grew to 2 sites and over 1,000 children a week. This was great, apart from I had 30 adults looking at me for behaviour management advice. And the only thing I had from past experience was opinions from other people and tools and techniques that were not underpinned by neuroscience and didn't work for every child and for every brain. This is when I decided that I needed to work with more crisis behaviours, crisis behaviour brains. And I started working in a residential children's home. Our children had EBD and CSE. It wasn't until about 11:30 at night on a Saturday that I was sitting in my sleeping bag with my pen and paper, and a full day of behaviour events were going around my head. And I was trying to unpick them and think about what was the brain science behind the behaviours. This is when I started to study neuroscience. From there, I became a foster carer and realised that we could use tools and techniques that would cater for every single brain, leading us to where we are today. So the first thing that I want you to do is grab a pen and some paper. You will forget 50% of information within 1 hour. That means that in an hour's time, you will only remember half of what I have already told you, and I don't want you to miss out on a thing. So when does the negative behaviour stop? When can we start to improve behaviour? I want you to have a little think about yourself and your own behaviour journey at the minute. When do you teach behaviours that you would like to see? On your first day in school or within your residential children's home, what behaviours are you teaching? Do you use a behaviour curriculum and is it progressive? What is your biggest challenge at the moment with behaviour? What is your behaviour goal? What are you thinking about in the future? What will behaviour look like for you? If you could click your fingers and change one behaviour today, what would that be? So what are the things that I started to do to stop negative behaviour, and what is the brain science behind that? Neuroscience shows that behaviours are taught and learned. They are habits and skills. So we can teach and learn new behaviour habits and skills. Yes, it does take a little bit of time. So behaviours and habits take around 66 days to develop. However, neuroscience shows that it is a skill that can be taught and learned. Neuroscience also tells us that lack of routine, structures, and boundaries sends the children's brain into the amygdala. Now, in the amygdala, children cannot listen, learn, process, or understand. We have a huge topic and lots of information about the amygdala and the behaviour brain if you would like to know more. Now, here's the important bit. Teachers who explain rules and boundaries on the first day of school and stick to them are much less likely to have behaviour issues in the future. Negative behaviors can be easily taught. We can accidentally easily teach and reinforce negative behaviors if we do nothing about them. This then becomes a problem because in schools, especially on the first day or in the first week, we have teachers who say things like, I don't want the children to think that I'm strict, or I want it to be fun and I'll correct it later. These are misconceptions, and actually we need to hit the ground running with our rules, boundaries and expectations, and there's lots of neuroscience to support this. So these are some of the things that used to happen to me many, many years ago, but are happening within our schools at the moment. We've got inconsistent teaching and reinforcement of behaviours. We've got schools without behaviour curriculums that aren't teaching behaviours from reception to year 6. We've got teachers in schools that are reteaching behaviours year after year after year when the skills should already be taught and set in place. We also have schools at the moment that are teaching behaviours that are not underpinned by neuroscience, but from opinions. The first thing that I do to stop negative behaviour is this. I teach behaviour. We cannot punish or manage a behaviour that we haven't even taught ourselves. Neuroscience shows that we can teach behaviour skill. Yes, it does need to be transferred into the long-term memory for the children to remember, and it can take around 66 days. The brain does forget around 70% of information within a few days, which means on the first day back of your children coming into your school, they will remember nothing from the behaviours of the year before unless they were processed into the long-term memory, which means we need to reteach it again. On top of this, neuroscience also tells us that if the behaviour needs to be taught when there is somebody new in the environment, the person explaining or expecting the behaviour is new, the expectation of the behaviour is new, or the behaviour itself is new, we need to reteach the behaviour. So do you teach behaviour on the first day back? When do you teach the behaviours that you would like to see? And how often are those behaviours taught and practiced? This one has stopped and prevented negative behaviour not only in the classrooms, but also this has been a lifesaver in the residential children's homes and with foster care. And this one is called the dopamine hack. Neuroscience shows that adults and teachers that have stronger relationships with the pupils have less behaviour issues. But how do we actually form relationships with children, and how do we do that really quickly? We use something called the dopamine hack, and this hacks the dopamine system within the children. We use this on the first day back, where we greet children at the door by using eye contact and smile. Saying the child's name and asking a question causes the body to release dopamine and serotonin. That then helps form relationships really, really quickly with those children, whether they want to or not. Another hack that I've used to stop, reduce, or improve behaviour is the routine hack. Now, I know people say about the importance of routines, but this is actually a thing. Neuroscience shows that routines, structures, and boundaries helps the brain stay in the prefrontal cortex. Now, if there isn't a structure or a routine, the brain will jump into the amygdala. Because there is no structure, routine, or boundary, the amygdala will cause something called prediction failure. This prediction failure means that children will enter the amygdala. In the amygdala, children cannot listen, learn, process, or understand. So why would we want children to be in the amygdala if we can help them stay in the prefrontal cortex? I stopped and improved behaviour issues in my classroom and residential children's homes with my foster care children, with thousands of children in my childcare business by doing anti-amygdala hacks. I don't know how much you know about your behaviour brain or the amygdala and the amygdala hijack. We've got so much information about the behaviour brains and how they impact behaviour if you would like to know more. But basically, if a child's brain enters the amygdala, they cannot listen, learn, process, or understand. So we do everything that we can to keep the brain out of the amygdala. An amygdala hijack can take milliseconds to take over the brain, and it can take between days, hours, and weeks to bring children back from the amygdala into the prefrontal cortex. We use things like brain switch cards, which help children switch quickly from the amygdala to the prefrontal cortex. However, this can take time and practice. So we want to make sure that our classrooms are anti-amygdala. Using a behaviour curriculum will also stop and improve behaviour. I've used the behaviour curriculum for the last 8 years, and this has meant that children have learned independent behaviours by year 4. We've now got schools using behaviour curriculums that introduce behaviours in reception, independent behaviours by the end of Key Stage 1, and children are supporting and regulating their friends in Key Stage 2. Through using a curriculum, we can save hours of time and effort. This means that behaviours are taught initially in the early years and just retouched and practiced as the children move throughout the school. This also means that behaviours are learned and processed into the long-term memory, so we don't have to spend weeks trying to remind the children of those behaviours. This is a golden rule that I want you to remember for stopping negative behaviours. I talk to teachers all of the time, and this one is a topic that we talk about more frequently than anything else. I shouldn't have to teach that behavior. Is that a behavior I should teach? Here's the thing I want you to think about. Neuroscience shows that if the child is in a new place, if it is a new person or a new environment, a new behavior expectation, the behavior needs to be taught again. This means if you're using a different behavior expectation to the teacher before you will have to reteach that behavior again. Now, years and years and years ago, at least a decade ago, before we started using the behavior curriculum, I would work with the teacher in year 3. And what I would do is find out from her what behavior cues she was using, what visuals she was using, and how she was actually teaching behavior. That meant that I could use the same cues and prompts as her, which would save me much less time. However, if you have a full school behavior curriculum, all the teachers and all the adults will use exactly the same cues and visuals. This means that you don't have to reteach those things to the children. Here are some non-negotiables of how I have stopped and improved behavior within my classroom. The first thing that I have done is introduce the behavior curriculum, the progressive behavior curriculum. This has saved me hours of time. How can we punish behaviors that we don't even teach? We wouldn't have to manage behaviors if we taught them in the first place. Another thing that has allowed me to stop and manage those behaviours is by doing a behaviour audit on the first day of school. I either do the behaviour audit on the last day in their last class or on their first day in my class. And what this means is we can monitor the children and write down all the things they can do really well and all of the things that we need to improve on. We also use this in residential children's homes and with foster care children. And this is just almost like a behaviour assessment to assess where the children are, what we need to do to get them where we want to get them. To stop behavior, I need to teach behavior as easily and quickly as possible. We use something called the power of 3, and this hacks into the neuroscience of how to easily and quickly teach behavior. The power of 3 is something that we use within our methods and frameworks, and if you would like to know more information, drop me a message. Behavior stops and improves when we reduce anxiety and triggers. Just like I said before, we need children to be in the prefrontal cortex to be able to listen, learn, process, understand, and behave. Children are unable to listen, learn, process, and understand when they are in the amygdala. However, our classrooms are huge amygdala magnets. We trigger children's amygdalas from the minute they walk through the door to the minute they leave. Children can enter the amygdala thousands of times within our classroom in milliseconds, yet it can take us hours or the full day to bring them back from the amygdala. Amygdala triggers and amygdala hijacks happen all of the time, and we've got a video on that. But it's things like changing children's seats, changing routine, unexpected loud noises. Anything that causes an amygdala hijack means that children cannot listen, learn, process, or understand, and that is something that I would like to keep to a minimum. When talking with teachers about how to stop or improve behaviour, these are some questions that they asked. So firstly, what if a child doesn't follow the rules? This one can take a long time to answer, but basically apply consequences. The neuroscience behind consequences is something we talk about in another video. However, a consequence basically needs to be timely, appropriate, and linked to the behaviour. If a child doesn't follow the rules, we need to apply a consequence as soon as possible that gets them to think about the behaviour that they've done, so not following the rules. How have they done this and how can we improve next time? We use behaviour consequence sheets for this, and what this does is switches off the amygdala and switches on the prefrontal cortex. Another teacher asked, how do I stop behaviour if I practice the behaviour and they just don't get it? I want you to remember that behaviours are habits, which means they need practice, they need time. Behaviours take around 66 days to develop, and if you use visuals, they can be processed 60,000 times faster than just using words. If you want to stop or improve behaviour this year, we've got a back to school behaviour bootcamp, which will take you through the first 6 weeks of going back to school. Your routines, your boundaries, your expectations, the behaviours you've got to teach, or to make it even easier, we've got a whole school progressive curriculum to teach behaviour from reception to independent behaviours in Key Stage 1 and peer supported behaviours in Key Stage 2. If you would like to know more information about neuroscience behind behaviour, or you found this video interesting, you're in the right place. I'm Danielle Douglas. Let's talk behaviour.